Today we are coming live from the basement of the Jiva Ashram for various reasons into which I am not going to waste your time by talking about it. Jaya 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 Sri Guru Prema Kala Pataro Adabhuta Jako Parakha Adabhuta Jako Parakha Hiyam Agyanati Nirabaragyan Suchandra Kirane Karuna Suchandra Kirane Karuna Jaya Jaya Sri Guru Prema Kala Pataro Adabhuta Jako Prakash Adabhuta Jako Prakash Iha 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 Lokshana Ajachita Mohena Patita Heri Jo Paho Jachi Devalo Harinam Jachi Devalo Harinam Jaya Jaya Sri Guru Prema Kala Pataro Adabhuta Jako Prakash Adabhuta Jako Prakash Aduramati Agati Satataya Satamati Nahi Kosu Kriti Lavale Asri Vrindavana Jugala Bhajana Dhana Sri Vrindavana Jugala Bhajana mana mohe karalo upadi mohe karalo upadesh. Jaya Jaya Sri Guru Prema Kala Pataru Adabhuta Jako Paraka Adabhuta Jako Paraka Niramal Gaura Prema Rasa Sinchane Niramal Gaura Prema Rasa Sinchane Niramala Gaura Prema Rasa Sinchane Purala Sab Monira Purala Sab Monira So Charanam Buje Rati Nahi Hawala So Charanam Buje Rati nahi ho alam Rat Vaishnava Rat Vaishnava Jaya Jaya Sri Guru Prema Kalapataru Adabhuta Jako Prakash Adabhuta Yadabhuta Adabhuta 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 Jako Prakash. Jai Jai Nityananda Advaita Gauranga Jai Jai Nityananda Advaita Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Gaur Hari Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Gaur Hari Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Gaura Hari. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Gaura Hari. Jai Jai Nityananda Dvaita Gauranga, Jai Jai Nityananda Dvaita Gauranga, Jai Jai Jasodanandana Sachi Sutta Gaurachandra, Jai Jai Rohini Nandana Balarama Nityananda, Jai Jai Mahavishnu Avatar Shri Advaita Chandra, Jai Jai Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda, Jai Jai Khandavasi Narahari Murari Mukunda, Jai Jai Swarup Rupa Sanatana Raya Ramananda, Jai Jai Uriya Goriya Jato Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Hayachena Have Gaura Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Tomra Sabai Mili Koro Daya Ani Ati Manda Jeno Akus Prane Gaite Pari Anitai Gauranga Jano Janme Janme Gaite Pari Hanitai Gauranga Jano Janme Janme Gaite Pari Hanitai Gauranga Gai Jeno Hanitai Gauranga Akusrani Hanitai Gauranga Janme Janme Hanitai Gauranga Bahutuli Hanitai Gauranga Nite Nite Hanitai Gauranga Neche Neche Hanitai Gauranga Jai Jai Nityananda Dvaita Gauranga, Jai Jai Nityananda Dvaita Gauranga, Nitai 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 Gauranga. Jai Jai Nityananda Dvaita Gauranga, Jai Jai Advaita Gaurange. Nam Srishtam Manumapi Shekhi Putram Matra Surupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupuri Maturi Goštavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Aho Radhika Madhvasam Prapto Yasya Prasita Kripaya Sri Gurum Tam Natosmi Yasya Brahmeti Sangyam Kvachidakvi Nigame Yati Chinmatra Satta Yang Sho Yasyam Shakai Swair Vibhavati Vashayan Eva Mayam Pumangscha Ekam Yasyaiva Rupam Vilasati Parama Vyomni Narayanakham Sa Sri Krishna Vidhattam Swayamiha Bhagavan Prema Tatpadabhajam Gaura Shyamaruchojvala Viravita Amakshnar Vilasotavai Nrityanti Virashesham Madana Kalam Vaidaghyadi Dhatmavi Anyonya Priyata Sudha Parimala Stomo Madhaviksada Radha Madhava Madhuri Viravitas Chittam Mama Kramyatam Radha Madhava Madhuri Viravitas Chittam Mama Kramyatam. Radha Madhavayo Brahmaradha Madhava Madhuri Viravitas Chittam Mama Kramyatam. Guru Shastram Shraddha Ruchir Anugati Siddhiriti Me Yadetat Tat Sarvam Charana Kamalam Rajatiyayo Kripa Madhvi Kena Snapita Nayanam Bhujayugalo Sada Radha Krishna Asharanagati Tam Mamagati Ali Paripalita Prabalita Ksanandamalokita Pratyasham Sumanah Falodaya Vidho Samodam Amoditaha Vrindaranya Bhuis Prakasha Madhura Sarvati Shai Shriya Vrindaranya Bhuis Vrindaranya Bhuvi Prakasha Madhura Sarvati Shai Shriya Radha Madhavayo Pramodayatu Mam Sri Radha Madhavayo Pramodayatu Mam Radha Madhavayo Pramodayatu Mam Ulalasa Kalpa Drumaha Ulalasa Kalpa Drumaha Jayati Jayati Namanandarupam Murare Viramita Nija Dharma Dhyana Puja Diyatnam Katamapi Sakridatam Muktidam Praninam Yat Paramamamritamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me Paramamamritamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me Paramamamritamekam 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 Jivanam Bhushanam Me Paramamamritamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Sri Radhe. So welcome to Vrindavan. I'm speaking to you today from the basement of the ashram building in the Jiva Institute. And as you can see, I'm in front of a bare white wall. But this is really, actually this area, I would, if the camera business wasn't such a delicate thing, I would show you this room. This is originally the library where Babaji had his first library when he started the Jiva Institute. So this is the oldest building, really. And they still have classes here. They have the Bengali students, the non-English speaking, where the classes are conducted, and they do Harinam Amrita Vyakaran and the Sandarbhas and stuff. So it's, they do have a dozen students or so. They usually come here, but because of COVID, they've stopped coming. This COVID, what has it done to us all? It's in a strange way, like we're all in some kind of a nuclear winter. All right, so I'm going to share the screen and we're going to try to keep on track here. I am going to try to keep on track. So we're going to do Anuccheda 19. I think we've done up to 18. So I'm going to try to move along here. I want to move along, but at the same time, I want to be careful because I do want to, and I'm going to have to, do a bit of work on the file itself. But at any rate, so these titles are all tentative, right? And nothing here is final, but for the time being, it works. So Priti eclipses all other types of mukti in its essential nature. So you can see the subject that has been going along in all these other, in the previous Anuccheds, it's been a discussion of mukti and its relationship to Priti. So, he's already started talking about Priti being, being more, being the best kind of mukti. So it's other types of mukti. So Priti is one type of mukti, but it eclipses all other types of mukti. And where does it do so? In its essential nature, in its very definition, you could say. So tata nyesham apavarganam api tata taya tiraskrito mukta kantha eva shabda udaharyaha. Right, so he's already talking about this subject. Now he's going to give some more examples of this. Right, so tata anyesham apavarganam. So anyesham apavarganam means other kinds of apavarga, other kinds of mukti. So anyesham apavarganam api taya pritya tiraskritau mukta tiraskritau atra saptami vibhakti, tiraskriti. So tesham api tiraskriti taya tiraskritah te tiraskritah te anye apavargaha tiraskrita kaya muktaya pritya. The atra tad vachane tadrisha vachane tiraskriti vachane mukta kantha spashtavakyena shabdah udaharya shastratah itadrishah itadrishani udaharanani ishyante. Yani mukta kanthena anyesham apavarganam pritya tiraskriti drishyate pramiyate. Tasacha tiraskritihi kvachita tatswarupena kriyate kvachita ta parikaradvara cha. So this is also so this tiraskriti. So anya, other kinds of apavargas are put down, are defeated, are somehow or other reduced in stature, are exceeded by. So all these other apavargas are diminished by Priti. That's what you could say here. Tiraskrito, they've been diminished. Tiras actually means horizontal, right? So they've been knocked on their back. They're lying horizontal. And Priti is stepping all over them. That's what it really means. So Tiraskriti can be quite a strong condemnation of something. So anyesham apavarganam api taya tiraskrito. So that now that these have been condemned or have been rendered horizontal by Priti, are there any statements that to this effect in the scriptures anywhere? So he says, Mukta kantaiva shabdaha udaharya. So we've got to find some statements in the scriptures, shabdaha, that state this openly, mukta kanta. They proclaim it. We can't just go all the way indirect, and indirect logic. We need it to be stated directly for ourselves, for our benefit. So Jiva says, fine. So now what is this Tiraskriti? So he's going to say we're going to find different kinds of verses. We're going to find different kinds of verses that will show that Priti is somehow superior to other kinds of mukti, other kinds of apavarga. So kvachit tat swarupena kriyate. So sometimes we get that distinction is going, or that tiraskriti, right? That flattening of the opposition here. the flattening of the rendering of other kinds of mukti as being inherently inferior to bhakti. There are two ways in which that can be assumed. One is tatsvarupena, by its essential nature, by its very definition. Okay, so how do you define these things? So you define mukti and you define priti. And what do you get? You get two different definitions that are not exactly the same. And of these two definitions, which one has the more power, the more attractiveness? Is it liberation or love? Very few people choose liberation. Most people choose love, but they look for it a little bit in the wrong way. I wouldn't say in the wrong place, but I would say in the wrong way, and often in the wrong place too. Anyhow, let's get back to this. So mukta kanta eva shabda udaharya sacha tiriskriti kvachit swarupena kriyate. So sometimes it's done by its essential nature. Here we're using essential nature. But I think that if you understand essential nature is by the very definition of something. So the essential nature of something is how you define it. So what is its swarupa? What is its identity? Yeah? Your identity is how you define yourself. Not a person's identity, but everyone's identity. What is your identity? What is your swarupa? So first was by tatswarupena, and then the comparison now by mukti or by priti. So if you compare the two of them, well, then it's shown that priti is considered far superior to mukti by its very definition. And then kvachit tat parikara dwara cha. So parikara here means a variety of things, but associated things that are associated with it. So things that are associated with it, there's all kinds of things. Parikara, generally speaking, we think first of the associates, right? The actual physical human associates, right? So those are parikaras. But other things also can all be considered parikaras, consequences of many different kinds that arise from priti, the benefits of priti, the joys of priti, and so on and so forth. So here, let's see what we see. So we will now cite other clear statements that show that priti eclipses all other types of liberation. Such trivializations, I'm using the word trivialization here, so this tiraskriti, that's the word that's being attempted. That's what we're attempting to render here in English. Trivialization of mukti. Sometimes, whoops, here's a mistake. Sometimes comes as a result of priti's nature itself, so that's this swarupena, and sometimes by its attendant qualities, so that's parikara. All right, well, to some extent, these definitions, these English translations are slightly impossible to improve and yet inadequate. We use a lot, we have a tendency to use a lot of, I actually have been cutting out lately in the commentaries, and in the translations, the overuse of words, of Sanskrit words. I mean, what's the point of a translation if it's always telling you what the words are in the original? You want the text to flow as far as possible in the language of destiny, the language of the destination language. Anyway, trivialization will do for now. So such trivialization of mukti, that rendering horizontal I was talking about, tiraskriti, is sometimes comes as a result of priti's nature itself. So that's what I was talking about, swarupena. And sometimes by its attendant qualities, in other words, tiraskriti. Parikara. So then we did the last sentence there, tatra tatswarupena tiraskritim aha gadyena. So the first of these two, all right? So let's see if we can check now whether the translation was correct by seeing whether the example fits the subject. So quite often I find that that's very difficult. You think you have the meaning from the words, and then he gives an example and you don't see how the example relates to what it's supposed to be proving. So that's also a test that when you translate, then you have to translate it in such a way that it's evident to the reader. Sometimes, of course, Jiva himself has to point out what it is exactly that he wants to highlight from a particular statement. So generally speaking, if he really wants to highlight just one part of a statement, especially if it's a familiar statement, so then Jiva doesn't cite the entire verse. But this here, this is the principal verse of this Anuccheda. It's not a verse, it's a gadya, it's one of these prose texts from the 5th canto. So let's take a look at it. Yasyam eva kavaya atmanam abhiratam vivida vrijina sangsara paritapo patapyamanam anusavanam snapayantaha tayaiva paraya nivritya hyapavargam atyantikam parama purushartham api swayam asaditam no evadriyante bhagavadiyatvenaiva parisamapta sarvarthaha. Well, my friends, this is not exactly, this is a particular genre. So when we talk about Gadya in Sanskrit, so Gadya is using the word Gadya here. Gadya. And that's translated here by the following prose passage. So this is a prose passage, but prose in Sanskrit, it's a style of poetry. Okay. So now it's a particular complex style of poetry, but writing in prose, there's a particular way of writing in prose that highlights, you could say, the qualities that are inherent or that are potentially there in Sanskrit. So you could imagine someone speaking this, but this is spoken in as the height of rhetoric. So it's not in meter, but nevertheless, it has often signs or particular kinds of the abhasa, the semblance of a particular meter. So sometimes you'll read these prose passages, and suddenly there'll be a little segment of metrical text that you recognize from the particular long and short syllables that are there. But mostly this prose works in a different way. So yasyam eva, so the point is that it's quite long. So when it's quite long, you have to be very, you have to be awake. You have to be awake to every little piece of information that comes to you. So the information that's coming. So yasyam eva. So the first question is yasyam. What is this yasyam referring to? So yasyam is referring to Purva Gadyokta Lakshanayam Bhakta. Okay, so this is what yasyam is here. The yasyam here refers to the previous text where it was talking about bhakti. So bhakti is a feminine word. Yasyam is referring to bhakti. So yasyam eva kabaya. So the poets, the philosophers. Atmanam, the self. That's accusative case. So that's the object. Aviratam. Vivida vrijina sansara paritapopatapyamanam anusavanam snapayantaha tayaiva paraya nivritya hyapavargam atyantikam purusharthamapi swayam asaditam no evadriyante Bhagavadiyatvenaiva parisamapta sarvartaha. Okay, that's a very long sentence, and it's even hard to break up into little bits. But here, he's saying that the first part really ends. Here, let's end it here for a second, okay? So now what is it that they see? The kavis, they first of all, they recognize they are doing something to the self, to the atmanam. Now, abhiratam, constantly, right? Vivida vrijina sansara paritapo patapyamanam. So the atma here is being upatapyamanam. It's constantly being, sufferings are constantly creeping upon one. By various kinds of troubles in this material world on account of their different kinds of sins that they've committed, right? So on account of our different conditioned soul. So a person, a kavi, a wise man, comes to the point of recognizing, and this is really the beginning point of wisdom. Sanatana Goswami asks, Amike, kene amaya jare tapatrai? Why am I suffering? So first you have to recognize that you're suffering. But most people don't recognize that they're suffering. They think they're happy. They have to think they're happy to keep on living. And indeed, everyone is equipped with a certain fund of fundamental happiness that arises from being itself. Nevertheless, when you're identified with this material world, then you can expect all these entanglements. So, what do you do? Anusavanam snapayantaha. Here it says snapayantaha. He must put this as a parisamapta. No, okay, it doesn't even say that. Right? So here is right, so immerse. Well, they constantly bathe themselves here. This is what it's saying here. They constantly snapayanta. So the idea here is being in constantly here. They constantly bathe the suffering self. Tayaiva paraya nirvritya. So where is it? They're bathing themselves. They're bathing the Atma in bhakti, right? They're immersing the suffering self in the cooling waters of bhakti. And so then what happens? Tayaiva, on account of that bhakti, on account of that bhakti alone. Paraya nirvritya, by the supreme bliss that comes from it. Apavargamatyantikama purusharthamapi swayam asaditamano e vadriyante. They do not feel any special importance or joy when any other kind, the ultimate liberation, apavargam atyantikam. Well, whatever that is, parama purushartham, the supreme goal of life, whatever that is to you. If it comes and presents itself, that they don't care. They don't care about it because they've got the great joy of bhakti. They've immersed themselves in the ocean of bhakti. Yasyameva kavaya atmanam aviratam vivida vrijina samsara paritapopatapyamanam anusavanam snapayantah tayaiva paraya nivritya yapavargam atyantikam parama purushartham api swayam asaditam no evadriyante. Bhagavadiya tvenaiva parisamapta sarvartaha. So one thing is gone. It's not just because of that happiness, but he's giving one more reason. It's because they have become one with Bhagavan. They have become Bhagavadiya. Bhagavadiya. So we had this word in my Sanskrit class. The Bhavadiya, Bhagavadiya, Tvadiya, Madiya. So Bhagavadiya belongs to Bhagavan. So Bhagavadiya Tvena, because they belong to Bhagavan, because they've become a part of Bhagavan, because they've become one with Bhagavan through bhakti. Bhagavadiya Tvena, because they've now become representative, because they've become one with the supreme truth. Bhagavadiya Tvenaiva, and because of that alone, Parisamapta Sarvartaha, whatever desires they might have had have all fulfilled. Parisamapta, they've all come to an end. They no longer trouble, and one has all of one's desires are fulfilled. There's nothing more that left to be wanted. So in which devotion to Bhagavan, the learned incessantly immerse themselves, which burn constantly with the material miseries arising from various sins, and thereby relish a supreme bliss. Because of this bliss, they do not care even for the liberation that is the highest goal of human pursuit, even if it is made available freely. They have fully attained all their goals by becoming devotees of Bhagavan. So they're the Bhagavadiya that was said to devotees of Bhagavan, which is perfectly okay. So yasyam purva gadyokta lakshanayam bhaktau. So this is commentary now of the verse. So he's asked to explain certain things. So he's taken it out of context. So we had yasyam at the beginning. So what is that yasyam? So that's why I scrolled down before and looked, right? Yasyama purva gadyokta lakshanayam bhaktau. Right, so bhaktau, that's in the locative case. And these are also, this adjective here is also a locative case, feminine, singular. So this devotion is characterized by what was, described in the previous Gadya. So we're not going to go into it. We know that it's bhakti. Okay? So now, muktadi sampadam, mukti sampad anucharitvat, pari samapta sarvartatvam. So because bhakti sampad anucharitvat, so mukti sampad, the sampad, the gains, the wealth, the opulence, the perfections, the gifts of liberation and so on, of the different kinds of liberation. So all the benefits of liberation follow in the footsteps of bhakti. Bhakti sampad anucharitvat. So if you have the bhakti sampad, all the other mukti sampads, they follow. So their bhakti sampad means the glories or the wealth or the attainments of bhakti. So sampad can mean your property, your possessions, but it's your attainment. It's what you've brought together, what you've gained, what the wealth that you've accumulated. That's your sampad. So now bhakti sampad, other sampads, mukti sampads, what's material sampads, all the sampads, all the kinds of attainments that are possible, they all follow behind bhakti. And for that reason, parisamapta sarvartatvam, all of their desires have been fulfilled. Right? So, they are all contained, whatever other benefits there might be, whatever permanent satisfactions there might be in mukti, they're all contained within bhakti. So that's why it's parisamapta sarvartha. Parisamapta sarvartatvam. Completed, come to an absolute conclusion. All other purposes, because here we're talking about purusharthas, right? So here the artha, and artha is the goal. So all other goals have been achieved, you could say. No, or one becomes indifferent. So it becomes indifferent to all other goals. So tatoktam Sri Narada Pancharatre Hari Bhakti Mahadevya Sarva Muktyadi Siddhayah Bhuktayas-chadbhutastasyas Chetikavad Anuvratah. So there we have very nice, simple Quranic language, Pancharatra language, glorifying Bhakti. in open Mukta Kantha. Mukta Kantha. Hari Bhakti Mahadevya Sarva Muktya Disiddhaya Bhuktayas Chadhutas Tasyas Chetika Vad Anuvrataha. This is a very nice verse. Right? Hari Bhakti is the great goddess. And all the others, Mukti and so on, all the siddhis, all the perfections that we can strive for in human life, Bhuktayas, all the enjoyments, Adbhutaha, even the most, well, that Adbhuta, you know, here Adbhuta is going with Bhuktaya. So all the most wonderful enjoyments, the heavens of Indra, Bhuktayas Chadbhutas Tasyas Chetika Vadanuvratah. So they're like Chetikas. So Chetika is a female attendant. Right? Servant, so the servant is following behind the queen. So who is following also behind the queen? Well, Mukti, Bhukti. They're all following behind the queen. So this is very much like Vilva Mangala's verse, almost exactly the same. You know, Bhaktis Tvayi Stiratara Bhagavanya Syat Daivena Nakfalati Divya Kishora Murti Mo Bhaktanjali. Aha. Dharmadaya Samaya Pratiksha Mukti Swayam Mukulitanjali Sevate Sman Dharmadaya Samaya Pratiksha. Bhaktis Tvayi Stiratara Bhagavanya Disyat Daivena Nakhvalati Divya Kishora Murti Badhanjali Swayam Mukulitanjali Sevate Sman Dharmadaya. Kimutan Samaya Pratiksha. All right, I'm sorry, I don't know it fully perfectly well, but that's covering, that's Milva Mangala Thakur. So bhakti, if you attain bhakti to Krishna, then what happens is that you get a direct experience of Krishna. You see Krishna. Yes, you get to see Krishna. You get to see him first through the ears, but definitely start to see Krishna through the ears. So bhakti stvayi stiratara. So it has to be stira. It has to be, strong. It has to be nishtita. It has to be at least on the platform of consistent, constant. Yadi syat. If you should happen to have bhakti of such a type, then daivena nafarati divya kishore. So then the result is that suddenly we this divya kishore, this beautiful young boy, this Krishna appears before us. So then what happens is Mukti Swaya Muklitanjali Sevate Isman. So then Mukti herself comes and folds her hands and she says, can I do something for you? Do you need me at all? But the devotee is not interested. And what to speak of dharma, the dharma, artha, kama, all these other gains, these other goals of human life. What are they next to mukti? So they're just standing there waiting for their turn. Samaya pratiksha. So this is chetikavat, right? So the chetikavat, anuvrata, the retinue that's following along, chetika. So chetika doesn't necessarily just mean servant. it often means, you know, the attendants, the friends, the hangers-on, you know, the friends of the queen, you know, the hangers-on, right, all flattering her and all, you know, trying to outdo each other to please her, to get into her good graces in a way. But anyway, she's a Mahadevi, so that's going to happen like it or not. So Sarva Mukti Adi Siddhayaha Bhuktayascha Adbhutaha Tasyaha Bhaktyaha Chetikavat Anuvrataha Iti. So in which refers to bhakti, which had been mentioned in the prior prose text. Because the accomplishments of mukti, etc., only serve those of bhakti. It is said, sampad here was translated as accomplishments. So I think that's a very good translation here. So because the accomplishments of mukti, etc., only serve those of bhakti, it is said devotees have fully attained all their goals. Right? They have fully attained all their goals by becoming devotees of Bhagavan. So this is confirmed in the Narada Pancharatra. All the perfections, such as mukti and various types of wonderful enjoyments, follow the great goddess Hari Bhakti like maid servants. Ata eva anadaropi. So therefore here there's anadara. So this, what is this? They do not care for it. They do not care for liberation. Ata eva nadaropi. So go to the point. We're looking for openly statements that Priti and Mukti are different. Right? We've had the Priti as one of the Muktis. We've had Mukti has been glorified as the goal of life, right? As one of the goals of life, at least, right? Sukha prapti, dukkha nibritti. That's where our starting point was. So dukkha nibritti, that's mukti. So now the argument has been that dukkha nibritti that follows from sukha prapti. And sukha prapti here means Krishna priti. So ata eva anadaraha. So now that's been stated that so bhakti and mukti have been equated in terms of the four goals of life, you know, that the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, that moksha and bhakti is included in the definition of moksha. But bhakti is more, right? In actual fact, if you were to look at it like a diagram, right? Dharma, artha, kama, that's one path. That's the pravritti path. And in moksha, that's the nivritti path. So dharma, artha, and kama and moksha are actually opposed to one another. So this is what we're calling, because when we talk about bhukti, then we're talking about dharma, artha, kama. Bhukti doesn't mean just, you know, enjoyment. Bhukti means the world of experience. So bhukti, we're in the world of experience, and mukti means to escape the world of experience, to find pleasure in non-experience, or to find pleasure in the experience of Brahman. So now this is mukti also. This is for the Vaishnava. This is also true. To find the truth, to find absorption in the truth of Bhagavan, because that Bhagavan and Brahman, they're the same Paramatatva. So we have the equation of mukti with bhukti, then so if we take it, so now harmoniously, because the Vaishnavas accept the reality of the world, they can experience. So here bhukti means experience. They can experience the world. Now, when I say experience the world, they can experience the world, but their world is Goloka Vrindavan. They experience the world, but they experience the world as Goloka Vrindavan. like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, right? Eka dina grihe bhajane deke griha golokamoy. I saw everything had turned into Goloka in my own house. So that's what for the devotee, the world becomes Goloka. Because he's carrying his world within himself, he's transformed himself inwardly. So that's the way he sees the world, that's the way he likes to see the world, that's the way that the world comes to him. That's the way his consciousness has been transformed in order to see the world as Goloka, which means a world of love, yeah? We'll talk more about that, but it's because supreme joy, he's filled with the supreme joy. He doesn't seek happiness elsewhere because he's filled with the supreme joy. So what does he need to go look elsewhere for joy? But at the same time, he can be in the world of experience and experience that very same joy of bhakti in the world. Now, he's not going to go into the bars and taverns and that kind of thing. But even there, yeah, if a soul has fallen into that particular situation, still the possibility of bhakti is there, of seeing the presence of God in that situation. It is possible. So, anadara, but we have to make it, stress it, that it's priti, it's love. One has to become filled with love. And that love begins where? That love begins at home, in the Atma. And that love at home, that love for the Atma can only really be attained when the Atma and loves the Paramatma. When there is a oneness in love of the Atma and the Paramatma. So as we have seen, so any other kind of mukti, if it is not in the spirit of priti, it is not given much attention. So that statements, we have direct statements of that. Yatoktam Sri Vritrang Prati Mahendrena. So Mahendra says to Vritrasura, Yasya Bhaktir Bhagavati Haro Nikshreyaseshware Vikrirato Mritam Bodhao Kim Kshudrai Swakatakodakaihi. All right, so this is a common simile that's been given. But once again, a common simile for, a common kind of, if you want to say that one thing is superior to something else. So, Yasya Bhaktir Bhagavati Haro Nikshreyaseshware Vikrirato Mritam Bodhao Kim Kshudrai Katakodakai. So if you have devotion to Bhagavan, to Hari, who is the Nikshreyaseshwara, who is the God of all goods, of all benefits. Right? So whatever benefit you seek, right? He is the God of all, he is the God of everything that is good. So Nikshreyaseshware. So if you have devotion towards him who is the ocean of good, if you're playing Vikrirato, the Kridati is playing. It's playing in the ocean of devotion. It's an ocean of nectar. It's an ocean of the joys of the nectar of immortality. If you swim in that ocean, then what do you need of little trickles of water? Right? What do you need of a little trickle when you have the whole ocean? how much can you can splash around? You know, in the north of India, well, actually, practically everywhere in India, most of the year the rivers are dry, and then part of the year, they're these huge, miles across, oceans in the rainy season, right? So, but most of the year they're empty, and the children are playing there. Right? There's a little trickle of water in the dry season, and they're playing in the trickle of water. So, but if you have the whole, if you like to swim, if you have the whole Ganges, if you have the whole, you have the whole Padma, or whatever, that's too much. You get washed away. But anyway, in the ocean, he's talking about the size. If you have the whole ocean, well, what you need is a little puddle. That's what he's saying. Right? It's just a question of the amount. What is the use of waters from petty ditches? Okay, the ditch. From petty ditches for a person who sports in an ocean of nectar in the form of devotion to Bhagavan Hari, the bestower of ultimate welfare. Commentary by Satyanarayan Das Babaji Maharaj. At the time of Sri Jiva Goswami, Mukti or Moksha was considered the highest Purushartha. This was common knowledge in India, everyone knew it. Thus, to suddenly shift the Indian mindset from Mukti to Priti was an arduous job. Scholars from all other schools would not take Jiva Goswami's proposal with a smile. Old habits die hard, and so it is with old concepts. Mukti had entered into the Indian DNA. This can be witnessed even at present when the general masses are groomed in the Western education system, in which there is no talk of either Mukti or Priti. The traditional education system, he's talking about in India, the traditional education system has been out since 1857, but still religious Hindus consider Mukti alone to be the highest Purushartha. It is for this reason that Sri Jiva Goswami argues vehemently and repeatedly against the concept of Mukti so that the contemporary people will take him seriously. He says that there are two, so this is the point I was making about Mukti, although those things are also tiraskrita, right? Mukti on the one hand, and then bhukti on the other hand. But combining the reality of the world with the mithya, the Brahma Satyam, Jagad Mithya. To say Jagad Satyam, Jagad Brahma, then that's you enter into entering to different kinds of sadhanas and different kinds of concepts, and that's what really we are talking about with bhakti. All right, let's go on here. Let's follow Babaji instead of me. So he says there that there are two types of statements that establish Priti as superior to Mukti. The first are direct statements. These statements describe that the very swarupa of Priti is such that once a person has it, they feel completely fulfilled and have absolutely no interest in Mukti or Apavarga. An example of this is the prose text cited here. The second type are indirect statements. They glorify the qualities and effects of Priti that minimize Mukti. So when one has Priti, then one engages in service to Bhagavan and his devotees. This service brings so much bliss that a devotee cannot think of trading it for Mukti. Examples of these effects of Priti will be given in the following Anucchedas. The description of all the goals of life being handmaids to Priti is nicely stated by Bilvamangala Thakur. Bhakti is the one I quoted already. Bhakti stvai stiratara bhagavanya disyat daivena na phalati divya kishora murti Mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharma sakama gataya samaya pratiksha. I was dropping the word gataya. Dharma sakama gataya, the goals of dharma, artha, and kama. Samaya pratiksha are just standing there waiting for their turn. Okay, so, oh Bhagavan, if we should ever become engaged in firm devotional service unto you, in your form as a supernaturally beautiful youth will suddenly appear before us. Not only that, but liberation will stand at our door with folded hands, waiting to serve us. While all the other goals of life, dharma, mastering one's occupational duty, artha, wealth, and kama, sensual satisfaction, patiently wait for their chance to serve us. Oh, look at this. We found, okay, we'll just finish with, we'll finish Madhurena Samapayet. We'll finish here with Prabodha, quote from Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati. Yasyah spurjat pada nakamani jyotireka chataya sandra premamrita rasamaha sindhu kotir vilasah सा चेत राधा रचयति कृपा दृष्टिपातं कदाचित् मुक्तिस्तुच्छी भवति बहुश प्राकृता श्री. Okay, so this kind of statement, you know, it becomes a poetic, you know, kind of trope, and so people try to say it in a better way. So poetry becomes a kind of a competition of saying the same thing in a different way, in a better way, in a way that one, you know, in a way that brings out its qualities in it, or it has something special to say. So here, this one is about, it's Sa Radha. So if Sa Chet Radha, the last two lines, right? So this is the last two lines of the important information here. Sa Chet Radha Rachayati Kripa Drishtipatam Kadachit Muktistuchi Bhavati Bahusha Prakrita Shri. So if Radharani should grace the devotee with a glance of mercy at any time, then that devotee finds that mukti, he becomes indifferent to mukti. Mukti becomes insignificant to him. He becomes indifferent to mukti. And what to speak of the other things that are gained in this world or in the next. The prakrita, aprakrita Shri. And so what is Radha? Yasya spurjat pada nakamani jyoti reka chataya sandra premamrita rasamaha sindhu kotir vilasa. So the playful movement of a single ray of the light coming from Sri Radha's glistening toenail jewels is equivalent to many millions of great oceans filled with the nectar of the most intense pure love. If she would just once cast a glance of mercy on anyone, then liberation and all spiritual and material opulences will become insignificant to them, will become completely insignificant. Anyway, there we finish with Prabodhananda Saraswati. So you can see how he's taken, how this one concept, Chetika, but right, this idea of mukti being insignificant, how this becomes a theme in the poetry of the devotees. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah sarve santu niramayah sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet purnamadah purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. The sound is very good here. It has a really quite a good acoustic. I like it better. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Radhe 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 Govinda, Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Jai Jai Shyama Sundar Madana Mohan Vrindavana Chandra, Jai Jai Radha Raman Rasbihari Sri Gokulananda, Jai Jai Radha Kanta Radha Vinod Sri Radha Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda, Jai Jai Raseshwari Vinodini Bhanukula Chandra, Jai Jai Lalita Vishakha Adi Jata Sakhi Vrinda, Jai Jai Sirupa Manjari Adi Manjari Ananga, Jai Jai Purnamasi Kundalata, Jaya Nandi Vrinda Tomra Kripa Kari Kripa Kari He Kripa Kari He Tomra Kripa Kari Deo He Jugal Charanarvindam Deho Jugal Charanarvindam Deho Jugal Charanarvindam. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Jai Shri Radhe Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Jai Radhe Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Jai Shri 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 Radhe Govinda. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Jai Jai Radhe Krishna Govinda. Jai Jai Sri Guru Charanarvind ki Jai. Jai Jai Samashti Guru Vyashti Guru Deve ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Jiva Goswami Pada ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Sri Priti Sandarbha ki Jai. Jai Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Sri Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Navadvip Dham ki Jai. Jai Jai Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Jai Jai Kali Yuga Dharma Harinama Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Solanam Bhutti Sakhar Sri Harinama Mahamantra ki Jai. Jai Jai Gaura Parishad Gana ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Jagannath Puri Dham ki Jai. Jai Jai Sri Jagannath Baladeva Subhadra ki Jai. Jai Jai Jagannath Puri ke samasta तीर्थ स्थान की जय. जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय. श्री जमुना माई की जय. जय जय श्री तुलसी देवी की जय. श्री जी गो माता की जय. जय जय श्री पंचकोशी परिक्रमा की जय. जय जय सप्त देवालय की जय. जय जय राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय. जय जय श्री राधा गोविंद राधा मदन मोहन राधा गोपीनाथ की जय. जय जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ की जय. निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि हरि बोल. जय जय श्री राधे. जय जय श्री राधे. जय जय श्री राधे श्याम.